Go where your best prayers take you. Unclench the fists of your spirit and take it easy. Breathe deeply of the glad air and live one day at a time. Know that you are precious and learn to trust. Amen. Well, good morning. Welcome to everyone. And I want to have a shout out to Florence Bailey, who turned 95 yesterday. Isn't that wonderful? And I know many of you, Johnny and Mary Lynn, visited her. Great lady, a great person, and so excited on her 95th. I hope she is as well. I think she is. I want to tell you about the best Mother's Day present I've ever heard. Marcy Seether got a call from her son, Mark. And she has 6 children. He's right in the middle. And Mark had not been home for about a year. And he said, Mom, I'm going to come home to visit. I'm going to come on Saturday morning before Mother's Day. This was last year. I'm going to have a cup of coffee. I'm going to pick you up. After that, we're going to go to lunch. Dress casually, but just something a surprise. She said, great. Well, Saturday morning, he comes to the door, has a cup of coffee with Dad and Mom. Then they climb in the car, and off they go. She has no idea where they're headed. She's dressed in jeans, sneakers, a sweatshirt. Now you drive out of town, and she kept wondering, where are we going? And then they get to the airport, and she thinks, well, I'm not dressed for a trip. Well, they go past the main part of the airport, down a side service road and around by the hangars, and then they come to one big metal hangar, and on the roof it says in great big letters, skydiving. And Marcy goes, Marcy's a mother of 6. She's about 67. She has taught. She's taught journalism. She's been a journalist. She worked as a lifeguard. She's raised all those kids. She had 2 boys that were in Afghanistan and Iraq. Let me tell you, this woman is tough and not afraid of anything except heights. So Mark says, Mom, this is going to help you. Yeah. Sounds like my voice. You're going to love this, right? He really says, Mom, you're going to be fine. Really. Just come inside and see about it, and we'll go from there. She said, okay, I'll do that. So she goes inside, sees the video, sees all the safety instruction. And before she knows it, she's in a jumpsuit, out the door, making her way to a vintage World War II airplane. Then Mark says something really wonderful to her. As the plane starts revving up the engines, he leans over and says to her, Mom, don't think. Don't think it. Just do it. Just do it. So with a little gumption, she climbs in. They take off, and of course what she's doing is praying, dear God, take care of me. And she notices she's not quite as anxious as she thought. Of course, she can't see. She's sitting down where she's not looking out any windows. And she says, oh, just get me through this. Well, at 13,000 feet, the instructor comes over. It's going to be a tandem jump, hooks himself to her, slides the big cargo door open, and pulls her to the door. And instead of panic, she said something powerful came over her. Have you ever been at that height? And where you really can see, and you're open, you can see the curve of the earth. And she looked at it, and it was spectacular. And she looked up, and the sky, she had never seen the sky so blue, because you could literally see out into space. It was crystal clear and cold, and the wind was blowing, and really refreshing. And then she looked down at the farmland below, and the houses looked like matchbox and lakes and stream, and it was magnificent. Instead of feeling panic, a little anxious, she felt this incredible kind of calm and kind of an energy. The energy almost of the universe as she stood there. It didn't last long because they jumped. They accelerate quickly to 110 feet per second. They are moving. And she said, but it was interesting, but it felt almost like they were still. And then she kept watching and looking. And she realized how much she could see. How the cars and trucks on the highway way in the distance looked like toys. How everything had its own perspective. And she said it actually was exhilarating. And then the parachute opens and they glided. And then it got to be very calm and much more quiet. And she got a chance to really think about things. She said it's rather amazing. Those few minutes seemed like hours. Thinking about her life, her family, her experiences, and seeing the world, she didn't think once about how high she was in the air. And then floating into a grassy field and landing perfectly. And you know what? She enjoyed it. She really enjoyed it. It was the exactly perfect Mother's Day gift. And you know what? I have no idea if Marcy lost her fear of heights. She didn't say so in the article she wrote about it. But she did say she discovered something she needed to know about herself, even at 67 years old. You see, isn't that what life really is about? Discovery? Aren't we always on the journey to discovery regardless of our age? And I know one thing, most of us, no, I'm going to be bolder. All of us need adventure to open us up to possibility, to let us see experience in ways that we do not, to see the world more fully than the way we normally see it day to day, through the grind, through the lens of our normal life. And that's whether you're 8 years old or 80. I studied with a man named Edwin Friedman, and he was, I can't tell you how brilliant he was, the smartest man I've ever known. He was cross-trained in so many pursuits. He was a psychologist and worked at the National Institute of Health, studying schizophrenia. He was a rabbi, and he mentored clergy, and he also had congregations. He'd worked in the Kennedy administrations as a system analyst. He was just over the top. But he said one thing of all his studies. He said humans need adventure. And he was a historian as well. He said he had studied history, and he'd looked back at the periods of time when the great explorers and the great adventurers had come to the front. Every time they did, the world was in stagnation. It was stuck. It was not moving. Societies weren't working well. There was not much progress. There was a regressiveness all around. And it was the boldness of the adventurers, willing to try something, that got the dam broken open, that let the waters of insight and ingenuity flow. And he said, individuals need the same, regardless of how young or how old. And you know what? You don't have to jump out of an airplane. But you do need to do something. You do need to do something to move you beyond your fears and your self-imposed limitations. I want to remind you that Edwin Friedman was a rabbi. And see, at heart, what he knew was that kind of adventure got you connected to something that is primarily you, that does not belong to someone else, that is not described or prescribed by someone else. It is you, the person God made. And adventure is the very thing that brings it out, the very thing that is planted deep in your soul, planted in my soul. Let me tell you about Morris Robinson. If he stood up here this morning, one, he is an extremely attractive, good-looking, virulent, fun, smiling African American. Late 30s, he is big. If you watched him walk, heard him talk, you would know, as Du Bois, he is a football player somewhere along the way. He's 6'2" and weighs 300 pounds. And he was a two-time All-American for the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. And he was a great student at the time. He worked hard. He was diligent. He was busy on campus. He was just one of those great people. And when he came to the end of that career, he had the chance to play pro ball, but it just didn't really strike him. And so he went into business. He went into sales, and he was instantly good. He married a woman that he loved dearly. They have 2 children. And he said with all of that, something was scratching at him, inside out. All the traveling, all the things that he had, there was still something that he couldn't quite put his finger on. He had grown up in a very musical family. He sang some. His family were all accomplished. They went to church, sang in the church choirs and quartets. And he had dabbled a little of that. He always sang in church choirs growing up. He had sang in the chorus at the Citadel. And he thought, well, maybe that's what it is. And so on an odd chance, he was super busy, traveling all the time, coast to coast. He started taking a workshop for singers. And it was hard to fit in, but he made it. It was a weekly thing. And about the 3rd week, the choral director had all of them sing one piece for everybody else. We're just going to work. She said, we're going to begin to work on each of your voices. Well, he was terrified because he'd never really done that much. He'd always been kind of back in the background. And so you know what he sang? The Star Spangled Banner. I love it. And he boomed it out. And about the first verse went, and then when he got in the second, she's up going like this, like cutting him off. She gets up off her piano bench. And she says, Morris, have you ever thought about singing opera? He had not. And that is where the adventure began. He started taking more music lessons. He had sight read a bit, but he learned to read music. He learned to sing, as these people do, in parts, singing the right note, singing the right, coming in at the right time. He began to learn things he did not know. He studied the history of music. He started studying classical music. He started trying to turn himself into a classic music singer. And then he got a small part in an opera. It worked okay. He got a second small part. And then he actually got a paying part in an opera. He sang in Louisville. He sang in Memphis. He sang in places that have small operas. And then he got a part in Rigoletto in Boston. And someone saw him. And that's when it started moving along. And if you found him today, this morning, by the way, he would be at Trinity Wall Street singing. He would also be singing at the Metropolitan in Aida, the Metropolitan Opera Company. His first album has recently come out. The title is Going Home. You know that spiritual? Oh my gracious. Google it and listen. You will be in tears. It is powerful. And yes, he is still singing in churches. And he's still singing the national anthem. A little bigger venue. I think last week he might have opened the New York Yankees game singing for them. Morris said this, I know God put me on earth to do something more than be a salesman. Nothing wrong with that. But I knew there was more for me. And he sings, he says, to connect to the God, to connect to God and the person God made. And then he adds, as a real evangelical, to connect to God who redeemed me in Jesus. You know, so many of us need adventure. I can't say it enough. But I really think we always think of you got to, run off and climb a high mountain or something. Nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. There's nothing wrong with those things. They do stimulate us. And sometimes we need something physical to get our attention. But sometimes I wonder if we forget to let our faith take us into adventure. Let your faith take you into adventure. You see, maybe that's how we get it. That's maybe where God helps us connect it into a deeper inner meaning. One that I know most of you want. Why would you be here if you're not looking for it? People don't do this otherwise. I'm telling you. They skip Sunday morning. They're skipping this morning. But they too want meaning. They don't know where to look. We are here looking for meaning, to try to know ourselves more fully, the person I believe you believe that God knows and has planted in us. And you know what? Never done. There's always something wonderful to discover, something to come to the surface. I think that's what Paul was talking about today in this wonderful lesson that we heard Joe Bacon reading about being transformed. Do not be conformed, but be transformed. What a powerful image. Transformation, being transformed, that place where you really do know what's down in here. We all know what's around us. I can tell you what kind of car I drive. I can tell you where I work. But when you ask me about me, that's not me. That is not you. We are something more. That's what Paul wants you to be in touch with. That's what he got in touch with. To know ourselves, to know what's authentic in us, and then somehow to live through that to some end. And we always know that end is always good. Every time it is good without exception. The best image of transformation, of being transformed that I've ever read or seen, is in a book given to me by a friend. My dear friend is in recovery. And so I'm going to read you some words. I'm like Tom, I don't like to read to you, but I hope you can listen and hear a bit of this. It's pretty short. But when we are transformed, we will become mature, responsible individuals with a great capacity for joy, fulfillment, and wonder. We will discover that we are both worthy of love and of loving. We will be able to perceive reality and recognize truth. Courage and fellowship will replace fear. We will risk failure to develop hidden talents. As we gain the ability to forgive ourselves and others, our choices will ever expand. Serenity and peace will have meaning for us as we allow God's balance and grace to flow in us day by day. Does that sound good or what? Does that sound possible? Then it's time for an adventure. And again, I'm not talking about adventures we do for fun. Those are important. But I've got to tell you something. I know a lot of people doing those. I've done them. They go mountaintop to mountaintop, and the valleys are filled with despair. Searching, 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 running, running, running. And when they're back to the valley where we live, it's like the mountaintop never happened. You know, last week I kind of talked about strongly how to raise healthy children. This morning I'm talking to you about how we raise healthy adults. And it's time we talk about it. And it is time we do something with it ever again for our generation. I don't need to tell you again, this is shooting fish in a barrel for me to start the litany of what's wrong with the world. One, you don't want me to do it, and two, it's easy to do. It's simple. The world is deeply troubled. But what do we do in response? We do this. You know what this is, don't you? We do this. We keep watching the TV. You know, Robert Ivey's going to have to repair all of our index fingers. We're going to be broken. What we ought to do is this. It really is time for us to do that. There are plenty of talking heads. Plenty of them. Christians, Paul did not have transformation in mind for us to talk, did he? There is so much capacity in you and me, and we barely tap it. And if we are honest, there is fear in us because we're afraid if we give ourselves to something, if we really give ourselves to something, it's going to take our time. It's going to take our energy. Absolutely, it's going to take your money. It will. No joke. And you're afraid of it. I know I've been working with you for 34 years. I've got the same fears. I say no a lot of times when I want to say yes because I am afraid. And what do we do with all this free time? Make more of it? Seriously? That's what we want our culture to teach our children? You want our children to learn to make more free time? You know you don't. I don't either. That's not what we want. I think it's time for adventure. You know, I played golf with some guys from England and Wales and Ireland and Scotland. I was matched up with, you'll love this name, Frank Longbottom. Frank is 78 years old, and I barely beat him. He might have beat me. Maybe I cheated. I don't know. Anyway, he's 78, a retired Anglican priest. He decided he wanted to go to school, and my guess is he grew up in kind of meager circumstances, and he's now going to Oxford at 78 years old doing a master's in history. And he's brilliant. In fact, his young PhD, who's 30-something, said, "Frank, why are you doing a master's?" And so now Frank is doing a PhD. And at 80 will begin teaching. See, adventure comes in all shapes and sizes. And it comes when we put ourselves and our fears to the test. I'm saying it again. You must test your fear. You must. Or you will be ruled by it and live under it. We must put ourselves in places to stretch and grow. And you don't have to jump out of a plane. And please, for goodness sakes, don't quit your job. Maybe it's just adding spirituality to your job. I talked to someone in our parish who said his practice now is caring for all these older persons that he takes care of financially, and now he is really taking care of them. And he finally understood what all his years were about. Maybe enter into that daily you pray for those persons and realize they're not clients. They're family. Maybe it's going to a Bible study, morning prayer, contemplative prayer. Come to church more regularly. Try that as a notion. Join the mission effort we're about to start with Green Magnet School. We have no idea what we're going to do. We'll probably be bad at it, but we're going to give it a try. Go work for a group that takes care of the homeless. Go do something for the mentally ill. Take care of a wounded vet. I have no idea what it will be for you, and no one can tell you. No one can tell you. But it will be some small, significant step. Some small, significant step. That's what an adventure really is. That's where it starts. So if you're ready for adventure, go with these words from Acts. In Acts 20, it says, God's gracious word can make you into what he wants you to be and give you everything you could ever possibly need. Amen.